They showed up with suitcases and left crawling. A dramatic statement, I know, but it's the pure, unvarnished truth. And what was inside those suitcases, it wasn't clothes. It wasn't souvenirs. It was the most meticulously planned, psychologically devastating betrayal I have ever, in my entire life, had the profound misfortune to witness. This is not just a story about stolen money. This is a story about a stolen identity, a stolen peace, and how, in the hollowed-out aftermath, I had to rebuild a soul from the ashes. The central paradox that haunts me even now is this: how can a person look you in the eye with such unwavering warmth while their hands are secretly sharpening the knife they intend to plunge into your back? The human capacity for duality is terrifying. To understand the depth of the fall, you have to see the height we were at. My life before Elena was quiet. It was orderly. I had a good job, a beautiful, if slightly too quiet, home. My life was a perfectly composed photograph, but one that lacked a vital central subject. It was built on a foundation I believed was solid, stable granite, predictable. Then she entered, and the picture exploded with color, with noise, with life. She was the vibrant, chaotic splash of paint across my muted canvas. We met in a coffee shop 5 years ago. I was drowning in spreadsheets, my glasses fogged from the steam of a latte I was too stressed to drink. She was at the next table, arguing passionately with a friend about the symbolic meaning of the color blue in Renaissance art. Her energy was a force of nature, a whirlwind of wild, curly hair and hands that danced in the air when she talked. She caught me staring, and instead of being offended, she turned to me, her eyes blazing with intellectual fire, and said, "You, settle this. Is blue the color of divine truth or profound melancholy?" I was speechless. I stuttered something about feeling it was both, depending on the light. She beamed, as if I'd just unlocked a universal secret. "Exactly," she declared. "Context is everything." She bought my next coffee. That was Elena. She made you feel seen, heard, and intellectually validated, all in the space of 60 seconds. She became the sister I never had, but always longed for. My house became our house. It transformed from a showroom into a home. The halls echoed with our laughter, with the debates about books and films that lasted until 3 a.m., with the smell of her terrible burnt cookies that we'd eat straight from the pan. The trust between us wasn't just deep, it was oceanic. It was a given, a constant, the air we breathed. I would have sworn on the lives of everyone I loved that her loyalty was the one unshakable truth in my universe. But here's the thing about trust that profound. It often blooms from the richest soil of personal insecurity. My blind spot, if I have to name it, it was a deep-seated, quietly humming fear of abandonment, of being ultimately too much and yet not enough. The rock for everyone, but terrified that if I ever showed a single fracture, the entire world would see me as weak and walk away. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, but that reliability was a cage I had built for myself. Elena, with her glorious, unpredictable chaos, seemed to hold the key. She made my stability feel like a strength, not a prison. She made me feel chosen. And for someone with my wound, being chosen is a drug more potent than any other. She, on the other hand, her greatest talent was her ability to mirror. She reflected back exactly what you needed to see. To me, she was vibrant loyalty. To others, I later learned, she was whatever she needed to be to get what she wanted. What was her negative trait? It wasn't simple greed. It was a voracious, bottomless entitlement. She genuinely believed the world owed her a certain kind of life, a life of aesthetic beauty, intellectual stimulation, and financial freedom. And if it wouldn't provide it, she was justified in taking it from whoever was closest. She saw relationships not as bonds, but as conduits, as tools. And my trusting, steadfast nature wasn't a virtue to be cherished. It was a lever to be pulled. The inciting incident began with a phone call. It was a Tuesday evening. Rain was tapping a gentle rhythm against my window. Her voice on the other end was a masterpiece of theatrical panic, breathless, choked with tears I now know were manufactured. "He changed the locks," she sobbed. "My landlord. He said I was late once, just once, and he just changed the locks. All my things are inside. I have nowhere to go." My heart didn't just break for her, it shattered. I said, "Of course," without a single heartbeat of hesitation, "of course you'll come here, for as long as you need." An hour later, she stood on my doorstep, drenched and shivering, and beside her, 2 large, rolling suitcases. Not duffel bags, not grocery bags. 2 sturdy, expensive-looking hard-shell suitcases. I remember the sound they made on my welcome mat, a solid, heavy thump, a sound of permanence. I helped her carry them in. They were surprisingly heavy. "Wow, what do you have in here?" I joked, straining a little as I lifted one over the threshold. Her smile was a flicker of lightning, fast, bright, and gone. "Just my life," she said, her voice oddly flat for a moment before the tremor returned. "Or what's left of it." That should have been my first clue. The weight, the finality of them, but my blind spot was in full effect. I saw a friend in need. I did not see a Trojan horse being wheeled directly into the heart of my citadel. The first few days were normal. A slumber party. We ordered takeout, watched old movies, and she cried on my shoulder about her horrible landlord. I comforted her. I played my part perfectly in the play she was directing. But then the small anomalies began. A letter from my bank, addressed to me, but with my name spelled Jordan instead of Jordan. A tiny error. Insignificant. I showed it to her, laughing. "Look, they can't even get my name right." Her reaction was nothing, and that was the problem. It was a void. No shared laughter, no comment. She just stared at the letter, her face a perfect smooth mask. Then she blinked, and the mask was replaced by a look of concern. "You should be careful with your mail, Jay. Identity theft is no joke." She said it with such gravity, such faux concern, that I immediately felt foolish for not being more worried. She was reframing my observation into her narrative, a master manipulator at work. It was in that moment a cold, sharp sliver of doubt embedded itself deep in my psyche. Why was she not surprised? Why did she look assessed? And that leads me to the promise, the hook I will set deep right now. Stay with me, because what I eventually discovered went far beyond a forged check or a stolen credit card. What I found was a sprawling, intricate financial scheme, a ghost life she had built using my name, my social security number, my very existence. And the moment of discovery, the single piece of paper that brought her entire house of cards crashing down, was so mundane, so perfectly hidden in plain sight, it will shock you. I will take you to that exact moment, and I will show you how her calculated betrayal not only spectacularly failed to ruin me, but how it ultimately, irreversibly, secured my future and my peace forever. Her ruin became my foundation, and that is the story of true justice. After the bank letter incident, a chill had settled in the house. It was subtle,
a few degrees drop in the emotional thermostat. I tried to reset it. I tried desperately to revert to the people we were before the suitcases. This is the phase where the victim clings to the wreckage, praying it will still float. I started making her favorite meals, complicated recipes I knew would make her smile. I'd suggest watching our favorite comfort films, but the laughter felt forced, tinny, like a bad recording. The debates we used to have now felt like landmines. I'd find myself watching her, studying the micro-expressions that flickered across her face when she thought I wasn't looking. A tightening around the eyes when I talked about work, a slight, almost imperceptible smirk when I tripped over a rug or spilled some coffee. She was enjoying my stumbles. The guilt and self-blame began to metastasize inside me. "You're being paranoid, Jordan. This is your issue. Your fear..."
The fear of abandonment is making you push away the one person who truly gets you. You're seeing monsters in the shadows because you're afraid of the light she brings. I was the guilty one. I was the flawed friend, too damaged to accept pure, uncomplicated love. I became despondent. The vibrant colors she had brought into my life began to bleed into a uniform, hopeless gray. I was mourning the loss of our friendship, even while she was still sleeping in my guest room. My attempt to revert wasn't just failing, it was actively dismantling me. The tension was a physical presence in the house, a thick fog we both had to push through. To understand the sheer scale of the injustice, you have to understand who I was with her, not just who I am now, telling you this story from a place of hard-won strength. You have to meet the me from before, the good me. There's one memory that stands out, a perfect fossil of our friendship from about 2 years before the suitcases. It was her 30th birthday. She had been talking for months about this specific, obscure art exhibition in a city 3 hours away. It was a passion project of a forgotten artist she was writing about. She had no car. I had a big project deadline at work. The day before her birthday, she called, her voice thick with disappointment. "The last bus ticket sold out. I guess it wasn't meant to be." I didn't hesitate. I worked through the night. I finished my project at 4 a.m., fueled by coffee and the image of her face. At 6 a.m., I was at her door. "Get in the car," I said. "We're going." The look on her face, it was pure, unadulterated joy, a joy I had created. We drove for 3 hours, sang along terribly to the radio, and spent the day immersed in art she loved. I didn't care about the art. I cared about her. On the way back, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You know, Jay, no one has ever shown up for me like that. Ever. You're my person." I felt like a giant. That was the power she had. She made my acts of love feel heroic. That was the good in me she exploited, the part that believed showing up was the ultimate currency of love. She banked every single one of those moments, not in a ledger of gratitude, but in a ledger of my vulnerabilities. And what of her? The bad. To paint her as a mere villain is to miss the entire, terrifying point. Monsters born from nothing aren't scary. Monsters born from relatable human pain are. She grew up with wealth, but it was cold, brittle wealth. Her parents were collectors of beautiful things, and Elena was their most prized possession. She was paraded, polished, and presented. Love was conditional on performance. Get the best grades,
win the debate tournament, be the most charming girl at the party. Affection was a transaction. If she performed, she received gifts, trips, a dismissive pat on the head. If she failed, she received silence. The cold, echoing silence of a large, empty house. So, she learned. She learned that love was not a steady, warm current. It was a prize to be won with cunning and charm. She learned that people were not for connecting with, they were for using. Her greed wasn't just for money, it was for the validation she never received as a child. The expensive car, the designer clothes she later bought with my money, they weren't just objects. They were trophies, proof that she was worthy, that she had won. Her malicious intent wasn't born in a vacuum. It was cultivated in the hothouse of parental neglect. She saw my stable, if quiet life not as something to cherish, but as something that was rightfully hers. My consistency was an asset she lacked. My credit score was a tool she needed. My trust was the key that unlocked it all. In her warped psychology, she wasn't betraying me. She was simply collecting what the universe owed her for a childhood of emotional poverty. And that is a far more dangerous antagonist than a simple thief. Back in the crumbling present, the small revelations started to accelerate. They were like spider legs skittering in the periphery of my vision. I was cleaning the bathroom we shared and found a single, long, blonde hair tangled in the drain. Elena was a brunette, a stark platinum blonde. When I casually mentioned it, she didn't miss a beat. "Oh, that must be from my cousin. She visited me at my old place last week. Must have gotten on my stuff." It was plausible, but it felt rehearsed. The strange car my neighbor mentioned, I pressed him for details. He said, a sleek silver Audi, man in a suit. Saw him a couple of times. When I asked Elena if she had a friend visiting, she laughed. "My lawyer? For the landlord dispute. He's been helping me gather documents." Documents. The word now sent a jolt through me. I was on my laptop, trying to check my retirement account. The password didn't work. I clicked Forgot Password. The security question. What is your dream job? I typed architect, my lifelong dream. Incorrect. I stared at the screen. How could I be wrong about my own dream? A cold dread washed over me. Had the account been compromised? The final twist, the one that broke the dam of my denial, was a smell. I walked past the guest room one evening. The door was ajar. She was on the phone, her voice low, conspiratory, and I smelled it. A very specific, cloying men's cologne, the same one my ex-fiancé had worn, the one I had a visceral, negative reaction to. The room smelled of him, and in that moment, I knew. I knew with a certainty that turned my bones to ice. This wasn't about a landlord. This was about me. Every strange thread was connected to me. The auditory shift, the narrator's voice becomes very quiet, deliberate, as if sharing a secret. A single, high-pitched synth note hangs in the background. Why the password change? Why the blonde hair? Why the lawyer who never came to the door? Why the cologne that felt like a deliberate slap? The questions were no longer whispers. They were a drumbeat. My heart hammered in my chest, a frantic bird against a cage of ribs. The pattern of our friendship was shattered. There was no going back. The open loop was widening into a chasm, and I was standing on the edge, staring into the darkness, knowing I would have to jump in to find the truth. The suspension, the curiosity you feel right now, that was my life. Every second of every day. A psychological torture of my own making because I was too afraid to face what was now terrifyingly obvious. The suitcases were here, and they were never meant to leave. The point of no return isn't a loud, dramatic moment. It's a quiet, terrifying decision you make in the silence of your own mind. I stood outside that guest room door, the ghost of that cologne still haunting the air, and I made the decision. I was no longer a friend offering shelter. I was a detective entering a crime scene, my own home. I waited until she left the next morning, giving me a cheerful, "Just seeing my lawyer again. Wish me luck." The door clicked shut. The silence she left behind was heavier than any noise. It was the silence of a battlefield after the first shot has been fired. My heart wasn't hammering anymore. It was a cold, hard stone in my chest. This was the hard stuff, the phase where you must trade your sanity for the truth. I had to extend compassion to the part of me that was terrified of what I would find. I whispered it out loud in the empty hall. Whatever is in there, you can handle it. You are stronger than her lie. I entered her room. It was neat, suspiciously so. The bed was made with military precision. The surfaces were wiped clean. It felt less like a bedroom and more like a stage after the actor has left. This was a woman who lived in beautiful, creative chaos. This sterile order was a performance, a hiding place. I started with the obvious, the drawers. Nothing but neatly folded clothes. Under the bed, dust bunnies. The closet, her hanging garments, a shield of normalcy. I was about to give up, the cold stone of dread turning into the hot shame of violation, when my knee bumped against the vent cover near the floor. It was the old-fashioned kind, a simple metal grate, and it wobbled, just slightly. My fingers found the edges. It wasn't screwed in. It just slid out. And there, in the dark, dusty cavity of the ventilation shaft, was not a nest of mice, but a nest of papers, neatly stacked, and a hiding archive. My hands trembled as I pulled them out. They were cold to the touch. The first few were her own documents, a copy of her birth certificate, an old passport. My hope, that sick, desperate thing, flickered. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was just her being paranoid about her own important papers. And then I saw it. The paper that would change everything. It was folded in quarters, crisp from being pressed in the dark. I unfolded it. It was a bank statement. The header was my bank. The address was my address. But the account number was one I did not recognize. And the name on the account was my name, Jordan Myers, spelled correctly this time. I stopped breathing. Time stopped. I sat there on the floor, my back against her perfectly made bed, and I read. And as I read, the world didn't just shift, it inverted. The transactions, they were a map of her betrayal. It wasn't just the money she had openly asked for. Those were there, listed as transfer to external account, Elena. No, it was the other ones, the direct deposits from my primary checking account, the automatic transfers she has set up to siphon off $200 a week, small enough to hopefully go unnoticed. The loan payments for a car I'd never seen, the silver Audi, no doubt. The investment in a business venture I'd never heard of. But the most devastating line, the one that felt like a physical punch, was the balance. She had been doing this for over a year. The total sum was a number that made my vision blur. It was a life-changing amount of money, my life quantified and stolen. This was the climax, not a shout, but a silence. The shattering of a universe contained in the rustle of a single piece of paper. What follows a climax is not immediate action, but a profound, sickening stillness. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat on that floor for what felt like an eternity, the paper held in my numb hands. I was an archaeologist who had just uncovered proof of her own murder. The emotional resolution began in that silence. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. The victim was gone. In her place was something harder, sharper, and infinitely more powerful. I felt a wave of, not anger, but clarity. This was the cost of her actions. This was the consequence. Not the money, but the death of the person I used to be. The naive, trusting Jordan was a casualty of her greed. And I, the one left holding the evidence, had to decide who would rise from the ashes. I carefully took pictures of every document with my phone. I placed everything back in the vent, exactly as I found it. I was no longer a violated friend. I was a strategist. The confrontation did not happen that day. I needed proof, a case, an irrefutable fortress of evidence. I went to a different bank branch. I hired a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud. I learned the language of forensic accounting. With every document we uncovered, with every digital trail we followed, I felt my power returning. She hadn't just stolen from me. She had handed me the keys to her own destruction. Her arrogance was her fatal flaw. She believed I was too soft, too emotionally fragile to ever fight back with cold, hard logic. The legal meeting was the final act of her play. She walked in, expecting a tearful, emotional confrontation. She was ready to manipulate, to gaslight, to cry. She was not ready for the 3-inch binder of evidence my lawyer slid across the table. She was not ready for the flat, dispassionate tone in my voice when I said, "We have proof of every transfer, every forged signature, every illegal account opened in my name." The look on her face, it was the justice I needed. It wasn't the satisfaction of revenge. It was the profound, quiet gratification of watching a predator realize the prey has teeth. It was the collapse of her entire reality. The police were involved. Charges were filed. The assets she had purchased, the car, the jewelry, the designer wardrobe, were frozen as proceeds of crime. But the true justice, the resolution that truly matters, happened inside me, long after the legal drama faded. Her consequences were a life sentence of a different kind. She would forever be the kind of person who did this. She would always have to look in the mirror and see a thief, a betrayer, a fraud. She would move through the world with the constant, low-grade fear of being discovered again. She would never know what it was like to trust unconditionally or to be trusted in return. Her life, for all its stolen finery, would be a beautifully furnished prison of her own making. She would never, ever know the quiet, solid peace I was building for myself. I had won back more than the money. I had won back my identity. I had won a fierce, unshakable self-respect. I had looked into the abyss of human duplicity and not only survived, but emerged stronger, wiser, softer in my compassion for others, but harder in my boundaries. The open loop was closed. The wound was no longer a bleeding gash, but a scar, a testament to my survival. The change arc was complete. I had been naive. I had been broken. I had faced the hard work of self-compassion, and I had emerged, not just healed, but forged. The betrayal was the fire, and I was the steel. So what is the moral of this story? It's not don't trust people. To live without trust is to live in a prison just as effective as Elena's. The lesson is this: trust is a gift you give, but it should not be a blindfold you wear. Your kindness, your generosity, your beautiful, open heart, these are not weaknesses. They are your greatest strength, but they must be guarded by the fierce, unwavering loyalty you owe to yourself. Resilience is not a trait you are born with. It is a muscle you build by surviving the things you thought would break you. It is the profound understanding that you can be soft and strong at the same time. You can be compassionate and have impenetrable boundaries. You can forgive yourself for trusting the wrong person while simultaneously ensuring that person never gets a second chance to do it again. The gained insight is that your peace is the most valuable currency you will ever possess, and it is worth defending with every fiber of your being. If this story of reclaiming your identity, of rebuilding your soul from the ground up, resonates with that anxious, on edge feeling you've been carrying, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, large or small, and wondered how to trust yourself again, then you are not alone. You are a quiet warrior, and your journey continues right now. If this resonated with you, please let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. It's a small signal, a silent nod between warriors that tells me you're here, you're healing, and you're ready for the next step. And that next step is crucial. The single most powerful tool I built for myself after this ordeal was the skill of setting healthy boundaries. It's the armor for your beautiful, open heart.